Hi, hello, everybody. I hope you are ready with the next research method. This research method that we're going to learn today is the most common method used by psychologists to observe the behavior of people and animals. All right, so before psychologists conduct the observation, they normally have a behavioral checklist, which means that they have a list on the things that they want to observe. This checklist is very important as it can help the psychologists or the researchers to achieve what they have expected as the aim of their study. So today you're going to learn many different types of observational method. You're going to learn about overt as well as covert observational method. You have to know the differences because in the exam they might ask you question, what is the difference between overt and covert observational method. So let's look into the definition for overt observation. This is when the participants know who the researcher is and that they are being observed. Normally, those observed are aware of the fact that the researcher tells the participants they're in the study, and the researcher may still participate actively being observed, or they might play no part and simply observe the behavior of the participants. This is known as overt non-participants observation that we're going to learn further in the next slides. And the other one is covert observation. This is when participants do not know that a researcher is in the group observing them. And then here the researcher pretends to be an ordinary member of the group and observes in secret. As what it sounds, covert, in other words, is hidden, meaning to say the participants are not aware that they are in a study being investigated. The next type of observation is unstructured observation. This is a study in which the observer or the psychologist or the researcher records the whole range of possible behaviors. This is when the researcher is observing the behavior of the participants in a holistic way. Holistic way meaning in many different aspects without the use of a predetermined guide. Meaning to say there is no plan beforehand, there is no checklist. They just simply observe the behavior as a whole, and then they're gonna get a summary on the behavior of either animals or human beings, which are the target setting as the respondents or the participants. For example, observing children playing with new toys, an observer will just record everything that is observed and there is no definite ideas that need to be focused on. Yeah, and the next one is structured observation. Okay, this is totally the opposite of unstructured observation. Here, structured observation is when a study is in which the observer records only a limited range of behavior. So there is a predetermined or checklist behaviors of what they want to observe. For example, when a researcher is interested to observe about classroom interaction among students, so they are simply looking at certain aspects, for example, how these students interact, participate, involve, cooperate with each other. Yeah, so can you see it's quite limited as compared to the unstructured observation. And the next one is naturalistic observation. This is very common, used by psychologists, and this technique involves observing subjects in their natural environment. As for the example of naturalistic observation is when researchers are interested in looking at certain aspects of parenting styles of different parents in their natural setting. So researchers have to go to the setting where there are parents and the children. It could be like the playground where you can see most parents are playing along with their children. When conducting observational study, it's very important for the researchers or the observers to come up with behavioral categories. This is related to the activities that should be recorded by the observers, or that should be operationalized, which means clearly defined. In other words, the researcher or the observer should have a list of behaviors that they want to observe in advance before they conducted the study. Yeah, and the other one is inter-observer reliability. This is very important as the researchers have to come up with the same record of behavior to make the study highly reliable. Remember, reliability is related to how a study finding or results is consistent. When it's consistent, it's reliable and it's trustworthy. So when there are two observers and these two observers have come up with the same data, the same information, meaning that the study is highly reliable. And we want to have, as a researcher, we want to have a high reliable of data because we want people to believe in our study. Other than overt, covered, unstructured, structured, and naturalistic observation, you also need to know these two types of observation or observer. The first one is participant observer. This is when a researcher who watches from the perspective of being part of the social setting. And here the researcher joins in and becomes part of the group of the participants that they are studying to get a deeper insight into the participants' lives. For example, not just human beings, it can be animals. Let's say that researchers are interested to identify or investigate about animals' behavior. So these researchers will have to study the animals in the natural habitat, and they have to live alongside the animals as well. The other one is non-participant observer. This is when a researcher does not become involved in the situation being studied, example by watching through one-way glass or by keeping apart from the social group of the participants. So you have learned this briefly on the psychology course studies. There are a lot of researchers or psychologists who use non-participant observer. They just observe the behavior of the participants one-way mirror or one-way glass, such as Bandura study on children aggressive behavior, Milgram on generating electric shock, on the level of obedience of participants, as well as Schechter and Singer study on the two-factor theory of emotion. The next one is talking about participant or non-participant observation still on this, but you have to know that when it comes to participant or non-participant observation, it can be either overt or covered. The researcher can be open about this, or they can hide themselves and they pretend that they are part of the group of the participants. So let's look into the strengths as well as the weaknesses of using observational method in general. Let's look into the first part of the strength. If participants are unaware that they are in a study, so they should behave naturally, so they will not be influenced by any demand characteristics, meaning to say they will be showing their actual behavior and they're not changing, they do not act differently. And this will also increase the ecological validity of the observation as it does represent the actual behavior of the participants. It can be either animals or human beings. And the next strength will be as behaviors observed are counted in a sense that it is using statistics or mathematics. It's countable and hence quantitative, meaning to say when it comes to quantitative data, it can be analyzed statistically. So we can make a difference between one person to another. We can show the differences and the similarities between human beings and animals. For example, I'm interested to know about the behavior of babies. So I'm gonna observe how many times the baby smiles, how many times the baby laughs, how many times the baby eat in a day. Or I'm interested to identify about how human beings consume caffeine in their daily life as their routine. So that is using amount of number that can be measured. Yeah, so this is one strength of using observational method because it's countable. It's part of quantitative data. So let's move on to the weaknesses of using observational method. Since the participants may know that they are in a study, especially in open observation, so they might not act naturally, and they might be showing other self of themselves, or totally not their actual behavior, and they will actually be influenced by the social norm, which is known as socially desirable behaviors, meaning to say, in other words, they are behaving like what other normal people behave in the society in general. So this will actually reduce the validity of the findings, as they might be influenced by demand characteristics, and it also might be difficult to replicate observational method, especially when it comes to naturalistic observation. This is when the participants are observed in the natural environment, and when it comes to natural environment, the IV is hard to control. It cannot be manipulated, and also there will be a lot of extraneous or confounding variables, which can actually reduce the reliability of the study. So your task for today is to come up with 2 points for the strengths of using overt observation, in other words, open observation, and the other one is to come up with 2 points for the weaknesses of using covert or hidden observation. Yeah, and other than that, I'll be asking you questions generally on the content, solely on observational method for today. So please be prepared. Please listen and watch the video thoroughly, because you might get the answers from the video here.